What if I told you the biggest reason most people never retire early isn't money, it's momentum? The same principle that propels rockets through the atmosphere is what drives your wealth upwards. In both cases, energy builds slowly before visible progress appears. The engine roars, the fuel burns, but the altitude barely changes. That early resistance isn't failure, it's physics. And in your finances, it's psychology too. Patience is the hidden fuel that turns invisible effort into financial liftoff. So before we dive into numbers and strategies, let's talk about why most people quit just before their financial engines start to take off. The real obstacle most people face isn't building a plan. It's staying in it long enough for the rewards to appear. Early on, the process feels thankless. You cut back where you can, set aside a portion of every paycheck, and watch your account rise by what seems like pennies. The numbers barely shift, and the excitement that carried you through the first few months starts to fade. You begin to wonder if the system is rigged or if early retirement only works for people earning far more than you do. It's not broken, it's just slow. Those quiet early years are where your patience gets tested the hardest. This slow stretch has a name: the momentum gap. It's the gap between consistent effort and visible results, a period that convinces many to step away long before progress is visible. Think of it like a rocket preparing for launch. It can burn immense amounts of fuel, shake the ground, and seem to hover in place, even though the necessary thrust is building beneath the surface. Investing follows the same pattern. You're adding fuel, but gravity, in the form of expenses, fear, or impatience, keeps you grounded until there's enough velocity to break free. This is the point where most people let go of their plan. Many newcomers to investing give up during the first few years, not because they run out of money, but because they run out of conviction. When a portfolio grows by only a few dollars a month, it feels like failure. Meanwhile, headlines celebrate overnight millionaires and early retirees who made it fast. That comparison fuels frustration and a sense that something isn't working. But what's really happening is invisible progress, the stage when the foundation forms quietly, building strength for the rapid growth to come. Missing that stage means missing the compounding effect that creates real acceleration later. It helps to understand that this frustration is built into human psychology. Research suggests we're wired to seek quick feedback. We like to see our actions produce immediate, visible results. It's what keeps us motivated in most parts of life. Investing doesn't offer that. It's more like planting a seed and walking away for years before seeing the first sign of growth. Each deposit you make may feel small and insignificant, but beneath the surface, reinvested earnings begin to layer on top of earlier ones. Slowly, the pattern strengthens, preparing for the phase when those layers finally compound upon each other. There's a striking contrast between two investors who start at the same time. One might quit after 5 years, convinced that steady effort isn't paying off. The other stays the course for just a few more years and suddenly crosses the tipping point where the curve bends upward. That's when compounding begins to feed on itself, when growth appears effortless compared to the early grind. Those extra years are the difference between discouragement and momentum. In reality, no magic switch is flipped. It's simply math finally catching up with commitment. To get through this stage, you have to redefine progress. If your balance isn't growing quickly, that doesn't mean it's failing. It means you're still fighting financial gravity. Every small contribution, every consistent month, is fuel being added to an engine that's still gathering force. These early stages build the base for exponential growth later. Once you see them as evidence of momentum forming rather than a sign of stagnation, patience becomes your ally instead of your enemy. And that patience isn't passive. It's the active force that builds pressure inside your financial engine. The same energy that, given enough time, will push past resistance and into acceleration. Because once the groundwork is in place, the slow climb transforms into something entirely different. Momentum that finally feels like flight. That slow, steady climb is exactly where the rocket launch principle comes in. It explains why patience isn't passive, it's the active thrust that propels your finances beyond gravity's pull. In its simplest form, the rocket launch principle shows that the early phase of building wealth demands the most energy for the smallest visible results. The reason has nothing to do with poor performance and everything to do with physics. When a rocket first lifts off, it burns massive amounts of fuel just to move a few feet. That energy doesn't vanish, it's what builds the force required to escape Earth's grip. Money works the same way. In the early years of investing, the financial engine is running at full power, but the results don't yet match the effort. Every dollar saved and reinvested acts as thrust, building gradually until it can overcome the economic gravity of expenses, inflation, and self-doubt. The silence that investors feel in this stage isn't failure. It's the hum of compounding beginning its work beneath the surface. Those steady contributions create the groundwork that will later make growth appear effortless. Compounding doesn't start fast. It crawls because the returns in the beginning generate small gains, barely noticeable from month to month. But each one of those small wins lays another layer of foundation. Every bit of interest or reinvested dividend becomes new capital, helping the overall system grow stronger. The early phase is the grind that builds stability, the long burn before acceleration. Quitting there is like shutting off the engines seconds before takeoff. It wastes all the fuel already spent. Inflation adds another layer of drag. It acts like atmospheric resistance, pushing back against your progress. When inflation sits around 3%, every dollar must first beat that headwind before real altitude shows up. That's why consistency in contributions matters far more than speed or timing. Each deposit increases the amount of thrust pushing through those headwinds. If you pause your investing, you're not just taking a break, you're losing velocity. Consistent thrust shortens the climb to compounding's breakthrough moment. Think of your early investments as stored energy. The returns might look small now, but they're building potential for future acceleration. Suppose you start with $10,000 and earned around a 10% annual return. After the first year, it grows to $11,000. Not impressive. But 7 years later, it's close to $19,500. The growth nearly doubles with no extra savings, simply because compounding starts feeding on itself. That's the inflection point, where the ratio of effort to reward begins to flip, and the returns start working harder than you do. The frustration many feel in those early years is the same resistance every rocket faces at launch. The drag means the engine is working, the pressure means progress is forming. In finance, that resistance isn't a warning sign, it's proof that the system is live, burning fuel, and generating thrust. Each small contribution increases velocity until the pull of expenses and inflation no longer holds you back. Patience in this phase is a form of power. It's the difference between waiting idly and building intentionally. By continuing the steady burn, staying consistent even when it feels slow, you transform time itself into an engine. Once that engine builds enough momentum, compounding begins to carry the load. Effort no longer feels uphill, it becomes motion with its own momentum. At that point, you don't need to work harder for larger results. The math begins to shift in your favor. Every rotation through a compounding cycle brings faster doubling, greater freedom, and less resistance. Understanding that pattern is the moment you stop guessing whether it's working and start seeing the proof behind patience. And that proof isn't abstract. There's a simple way to measure how time turns patience into acceleration, a small two-digit number that shows exactly how long it takes for your money to double. That small number, 72, turns time into something measurable. The rule of 72 is the simplest way to see how patience becomes growth you can count. It's straightforward. Divide 72 by your average annual return rate, and you'll get a rough estimate of how many years it takes for your investment to double. At an 8% return, that's about 9 years. At 10%, it's roughly 7. This mental shortcut turns compounding from an abstract concept into something visual, a reminder that every percentage point of return is really a measure of time. Here's what makes it powerful. The first doubling almost always feels the hardest. It's the stage when your financial rocket is still fighting gravity. You're doing everything right, but can't yet see the lift. Let's say you invest $10,000 at a 10% annual rate. After 1 year, you gain about $1,000. Useful, but not life-changing. Stay consistent, and after roughly 7 years, that $10,000 grows to around $19,500. That first doubling is slower because compounding has the least material to work with. You're relying more on faith than on results. But when that number crosses into double territory, belief starts to replace hesitation. The math begins to prove itself. Once that happens, everything speeds up. The next 7 years at the same rate turn $20,000 into nearly $40,000. Same time frame, double the gain, without you having to do anything different. Each new cycle compounds on top of the last, which means the absolute growth gets bigger, even though the effort stays constant. It's not magic, it's exponential growth doing what it does best. Every reinvested dollar becomes part of the engine, adding thrust and reducing time it takes to reach the next milestone. What once felt slow begins to feel natural. Momentum takes over. But there's still a force working against you. Inflation. While the rule of 72 shows how money expands, the rule of 70 reveals how quickly prices rise around you. Divide 70 by the inflation rate to see how long it takes for the cost of living to double. At 3% inflation, that's roughly 23 years. It means that even while your investments grow, your purchasing power quietly erodes in the background. Inflation is the drag in your system, the unseen resistance that must be overcome for true progress. This is why the early doubling matters so much. Without staying the course through that first full cycle, your returns might never surpass inflation's pull. Many people quit during the slow years, missing the moment when compounding starts working harder than they do. But the investors who stay, the ones who keep contributing when results are barely visible, are the ones who watch the pace of progress start to compress. The second doubling happens faster, the third even faster still. Each new stage becomes less about effort and more about how much runway you've already built. And that's where mindset begins to shift. The rule of 72 gives you a way to see patience as strategy, not just endurance. It replaces doubt with math. Once you witness that first complete doubling, you no longer need constant reassurance from market noise or short-term wins. The process itself becomes the proof. You don't chase results because you understand that each consistent month is one step closer to the next doubling. Compounding turns discipline into acceleration. Patience stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like steady control. You no longer fixate on daily fluctuations. You track the rhythm of your plan. Every contribution, every reinvested return becomes part of a predictable trajectory that's lifting you toward long-term freedom. Seeing the math unfold changes how you approach your finances. It grounds your decisions in time, not emotion. Because once you understand how your money grows through time, the next question becomes how to manage that growth strategically. The real challenge isn't just watching compounding work. It's designing your financial plan so offense, defense, and consistency all align to carry you through the next decade and beyond. To make that next decade count, you need a clear roadmap, something that guides every financial decision with purpose. That's what the 10-year flight plan does. It's the framework that keeps your offense, defense, and control over inflation working together toward one goal: achieving financial freedom within 10 years. Offense is your income, how much financial fuel you can generate and how quickly that fuel supply can grow. Defense is efficiency, how carefully you burn that fuel through disciplined spending and steady saving. Together, they create the thrust that powers compounding. Most people focus only on cutting costs, thinking thrift alone leads to independence. But defense without offense limits acceleration. The 10-year flight plan works because it builds both sides at once. You grow your earnings while keeping your spending stable, turning every new dollar into additional thrust. Here's what that balance looks like in practice. Suppose one person saves $400 a month for 10 years and never changes the amount. They'll invest $48,000 total plus returns. Now compare that to someone who saves 10% of their income and manages to grow that income by just 5% each year. Their savings rise automatically, turning $400 into around $650 a month over the same decade. Without chasing higher market returns, they've contributed far more, and each new dollar begins earning earlier. That's income acceleration in action. It multiplies results without dramatic lifestyle changes. However, growing your income is only half the challenge. The harder part is keeping lifestyle inflation in check when your pay rises. Every raise or side project tempts you to upgrade your lifestyle. New gadgets, better vacations, more takeout. That pressure erases progress. The key is learning to separate genuine quality of life improvements from wants that expand with income. True financial offense means widening the gap between earnings and expenses, not keeping them locked together. The wider that gap, the greater your capacity to save, invest, and sustain long-term momentum. Inflation is the ever-present drag in that system. Even at 3% per year, it quietly reduces your purchasing power, shrinking the real impact of your gains. To fight back, your contributions need to grow over time too. A practical method: increase the amount you invest each year by roughly 3%. It mirrors inflation's pace, maintaining your real investment power while adding to your momentum. It's a small adjustment that compounds powerfully over the decade, allowing your contributions and returns to push past economic headwinds. Consistency is what transforms this plan from theory into motion. Interrupting your investing rhythm, even for a few months, slows compounding dramatically, like cutting the engines mid-ascent. Automation eliminates those pauses. Set automatic deposits and automatic annual increases so you don't rely on motivation or reminders. The engine runs steadily on its own, letting your financial system gain speed without manual input. When income growth, spending discipline, and inflation control all align, momentum takes over. Your expanding contributions amplify your returns, and those returns begin generating more of their own. Within 10 years, you create a self-sustaining loop where your financial progress continues, even with less personal effort. It doesn't require extreme risk or deprivation, just a consistent application of the plan. 10 years might sound like a long commitment, but against a lifetime of work, it's a brief, transformative runway. Each year becomes easier as your system strengthens. The goal isn't just building savings, it's building freedom, the point where your finances operate with independence from stress and uncertainty. And reaching that point depends on more than numbers. It comes down to how well you hold steady through the quiet, unrewarding phases. The same moments when patience feels hardest and progress least visible. That's where the true test of this journey begins. The hardest part of wealth building isn't understanding formulas. It's maintaining focus when progress is invisible. Those early, quiet years measure your resolve far more than your math skills. Patience becomes the real currency of momentum, turning steady contributions into lasting acceleration. Each deposit quietly strengthens your financial engine, preparing it for sustained lift. Knowledge alone isn't enough. It's consistent action that changes your results. What matters most is having a plan you can follow, step by step, for years at a time. Stay disciplined, keep your financial engine fueled, and check out our next video to refine your roadmap toward lasting financial freedom.